The moment the first handful of hair came out, I froze. My fingers were sticky with blood. The mirror didn't lie. My scalp was blistered, raw, burning. And yet, the bottle on my sink said pure, natural, safe. That was the day my life changed forever. If this story resonates with you, or if you've ever trusted something that betrayed you, hit subscribe now. More true stories are coming that you'll never forget. She didn't recognize the woman who stared back at her. In the dim light of the bathroom, Sarah Wilson's reflection seemed fractured, as if her skin had become translucent. Blood seeped through thin strands of hair, forming tiny crimson rivulets on her pale scalp. Her fingertips, stained and trembling, traced the fine splits of parted skin. Beneath the buzzing fluorescent bulb, each scarlet blemish glistened, an excruciating testament to a beauty treatment gone horribly wrong. Sarah pressed her palms against the cold countertop, jaw clenched. Her knuckles turned white, but the pain coursing through her scalp rendered her still. A single breath escaped her in a quivering sigh as she studied the fallout. Feathered flakes, like macabre snowfall, dusted her shoulders. Her chest tightened with each ragged inhale. The woman in the mirror, once confident, now appeared fragile and haunted, her reflection a terror that she could neither turn away from nor fully accept. The overhead light cast harsh shadows along her swollen cheeks, accentuating every red patch, every inflamed ridge. The bathroom felt claustrophobic, shrinking walls pressing inward as if to crush her under the weight of fear. She winced, smoothing a damp washcloth across her skin, but the sting returned immediately, and with it, the guilt. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not to her. How had it come to this? Just 3 weeks ago, Sarah's world looked so different. She'd sat at the dinner table in peaceful contentment, the scent of homemade mashed potatoes drifting through the air. She and her husband, Michael, greeted each other across the table with warmth in their eyes. Emma, their curious teenage daughter, had set aside her phone to ask a thoughtful question about her day. Ryan, their energetic 12-year-old, chattered excitedly about his baseball practice, his freckled face lighting with pride when his mother smiled. That Sarah had been vibrant, luminous, her hair a source of confidence and pride. She had felt beautiful in a way she hadn't in years. Tonight Sarah barely recognized her reflection, and not just because her hairline was thinning. Her face was puffy, her eyes rimmed with red from crying and sleepless nights. She had entered this bathroom expecting to get ready for another day, but instead found herself cowering behind a scarf, fighting the tears she could no longer shed. The memory of that dinner still glowed in her mind. The golden light of the Texas sunset had bathed everything in warmth and possibility. Nancy Thompson had appeared at the door with perfect posture and confidence radiating from her. She'd held out a sleek, minimalist bottle filled with pure essence, promising more than healthy hair, promising youth and vitality. Sarah's heart had fluttered then, propelled by hope and a hint of vanity. She had squeezed the pearlescent liquid into her palm, breathing in the intoxicating lavender scent. Nancy's words echoed in her memory, smooth and insistent. It's all natural, botanical. It felt like destiny, an antidote to the creeping silver at her temples. But destiny, it turned out, could burn. Tonight, each rich detail of that past moment twisted into betrayal. The image of that elegant bottle, once so full of promise, now sat on the counter behind her, a taunting reminder of toxic beauty. She reached for it, fingertips brushing the cap. It was almost too much to bear. Instead, she stepped back and watched as her own gaze betrayed shame and disbelief. Sarah wrapped a scarf around her head with trembling hands, the fabric warm against her chilled skin. She glanced at the clock on the wall. 40 minutes. Michael had been pacing the hallway, knocking on her closed door, calling her name softly but persistently. She could imagine the concern in his voice, the tight worry lines between his brows. She could hear the words hovering near the threshold. Call a doctor. It's time. Her breath caught. She wanted to respond, to reassure him, but the pain in her scalp made even whispering impossible. She closed her eyes, fighting to steady her mind. She pictured Emma's face, eyes bright with concern, voice soft but insistent as she'd said, "Mom, this isn't normal." She pictured Ryan, his small hand touching her neck. "Are you dying, Mom?" She felt as if she were being buried alive in her own house. The sterile mirror, the flickering bulb, the bottle of pure essence, they formed the walls of her worsening panic. She remembered Nancy's text that morning, "Push through. The detox phase means it's working." The words felt poisonous now. Every day the pain had deepened, but her denial had been fueled by Nancy's reassurance. Her phone buzzed again. At first she couldn't bring herself to look. Then she glanced down to see another message from Nancy, cheerful and oblivious. So many ladies loved the conditioner. Are you ready for the party next week? Sarah's chest clenched with fury and betrayal. A wave of nausea rose. The idea that Nancy might be out there, smiling, pitching, recruiting, while Sarah lay bleeding and broken, felt savage. It took everything Sarah had not to fling the phone across the room. Instead, she sat heavily on the closed toilet lid, pressure on her aching muscles. She rested her face in her hands and pressed down hard against her temples as if to crush the overwhelming thoughts. That's when the tears came, slow at first, gathering like black clouds, pooling in her palms before dripping to the tile floor. She felt utterly lost. Her identity, the long hair, the warm smiles, the gentle confidence, was slipping through her fingers. She realized she had invested more than money. She had invested faith, in beauty, in friendship, in the promise of transformation. All of it felt hollow now, lying in shattered pieces around her. But through the pain and the tear-blurred lens of her own despair, a spark flickered, a seed of anger, seeded by betrayal, nourished by injustice. The same light that had once urged her to try something new, now urged her to fight. She owed herself that much. She owed her children that much. And deep beneath the blanket of fear, buried under guilt and hurt, she felt the fragile promise of purpose. She stood abruptly, her legs shaky but determined. She reached for the bottle again, not to use it, but to hold it up and let its ugliness reflect in the mirror. She whispered, voice gone to a whisper, "This ends tonight." It wouldn't save her hair or erase the pain. It wouldn't change the burning or the scars. But it could reclaim something more important, her voice. As Sarah wrapped the scarf more tightly and turned away from the mirror for the first time, she made herself a promise. Words would replace denial. Action would replace suffering. Something better had to come of this. And tonight, at least, that promise felt like something real enough to hold on to. 3 weeks earlier, the Wilson home glowed with the kind of warmth that lived in memory long after the light faded. The golden hour sun spilled through the kitchen window, washing the countertops and floor in a soft amber glow. Outside, the Texas evening hummed gently, the cicadas just beginning to stir. Inside, laughter danced above the clinking of silverware and the comforting aroma of mashed potatoes, roasted chicken, and freshly baked apple pie. Sarah moved through the kitchen with practiced ease, her hands moving from pot to plate, her mind awash in the soft rhythm of family ritual. At 38, she no longer sought grand adventures. Her happiness was grounded in smaller, quieter things. A dinner made from scratch, a good night's sleep, the sound of her son's unfiltered joy as he talked about baseball. Michael sat at the head of the table, his reading glasses perched on the bridge of his nose as he reached for the salt. His presence was steady, grounding, like the old oak tree in their front yard, unmoving but always watching, always waiting. Across from him, Emma twirled her fork absent-mindedly, her phone face down for once, her expression unusually open. Ryan, their youngest, had launched into a detailed recap of his first week back at baseball practice. His hands moved with enthusiasm, his face lighting with every exaggerated detail. "Coach said I could be a starting pitcher this season." "Me," he had exclaimed moments earlier, and the table had erupted in warm approval. Sarah, watching her children and husband laugh, had felt a quiet joy expand in her chest, an unspoken recognition that these were the moments that made a life whole. There had been a time when she'd feared this sort of contentment might never come. Years ago, the postpartum haze after Emma was born had left her shaken, uncertain, but time had been kind. She had grown into herself, shed expectations that didn't belong to her, and settled into a life that felt uniquely, comfortably hers. Their 2-story home wasn't grand, but it was filled with evidence of love. Family photos lined the hallway. Emma's old ballet shoes, spray-painted gold, hung in a shadow box in the entryway. Ryan's crayon masterpieces covered the refrigerator. The smell of dinner mingled with the scent of the candles Sarah lit every evening, a blend of sage and vanilla, and it felt like a sanctuary. As she sliced the apple pie, the doorbell rang. The sound wasn't alarming, just unexpected. Emma jumped up quickly, eager to be helpful. Sarah watched her daughter disappear around the corner and heard the door creak open, followed by an all-too-familiar voice. And then, Nancy Thompson stepped into the room. Her presence was, as always, effortless. Not a blonde hair out of place. She wore high-end athleisure, leggings that looked designer, a hoodie just oversized enough to be fashionable, and her makeup was flawless in a way that suggested either a makeup artist or a minor miracle. She beamed as she entered, holding out a glossy gift bag in both hands. The movement was rehearsed, precise, and still Sarah felt touched. Nancy's timing, her constant presentation of thoughtful gestures, had always been part of her charm. "Sorry to interrupt," Nancy had said, though the gleam in her eyes suggested no such thing. She placed the bag on the counter as if bestowing treasure. Sarah smiled politely, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Nancy had been more distant lately, skipping the neighborhood book club, rarely joining their Saturday walks. When she did appear, it was always with new energy, like someone who had discovered a secret she was dying to share. She gestured to the gift bag, its tissue paper rustling like silk. Sarah opened it and pulled out a sleek pale bottle with a minimalist label, "Pure Essence, Nature's Remedy." The design was elegant, understated. It felt expensive in the hand. Sarah turned it over, her eyes scanning the ingredient list, words in Latin, botanical sounding, mysterious and exotic. Nancy was already talking, animated and glowing. "It's herbal, totally natural, and exclusive," she said, the words flowing like a stream. "I've been using it for a month. I haven't changed anything else, and people keep asking if I've had work done." "No joke." Michael raised an eyebrow from his seat but said nothing, choosing instead to refill his coffee. Sarah caught his glance, one part skepticism, one part amusement, but she ignored it. She ran her fingers over the bottle's label again. "Nature's Remedy." It sounded like a whisper from someplace cleaner, simpler, somewhere untouched by the grind of modern motherhood and the passage of time. Nancy declined the offer to stay for dessert, flashing her signature smile and promising to call soon. Sarah walked her to the door, noting the business cards peeking from Nancy's purse. "Wellness Advocate," they read, in swirling font. "Pure Essence products." Later, after the dishes were done and the children were in bed, Sarah had placed the bottle on her bathroom counter, turning it once, then again, like an object of mystery. The label caught the light, casting soft reflections across the marble. She imagined her hair shinier, thicker. She imagined, quietly and without full awareness, that it might make her feel younger. At that moment, she didn't think of caution. She didn't think of warnings, of ingredients she couldn't pronounce, of companies hiding behind pretty marketing. She thought only of possibility. That slender bottle seemed to promise something more than beautiful hair. It promised a return to herself, to something she had once been and might still be. She didn't know yet that she was holding the beginning of a transformation, but not the one she had hoped for. The bottle stood quietly on the bathroom counter, as elegant and unassuming as the evening it had entered her life. Its soft matte surface gleamed under the gentle glow of the vanity light. Sarah picked it up, her fingers grazing the curved edges with care. The words on the label, "Nature's Remedy," still clung to her thoughts like perfume in the air. She unscrewed the cap and was immediately embraced by a fragrance both familiar and foreign, lavender with something earthier beneath, something elusive and ancient, like wild roots unearthed after rain. She had never put much stock in branding, but tonight, standing barefoot on cold tiles, wearing an old t-shirt, her reflection caught her eye in a way it hadn't in years. Her hair, though pulled back, still held the weight of youth. She hadn't been to a salon in months, hadn't had time between PTA meetings, grocery runs, and late-night dishwashing. But the bottle whispered a promise. "This is for you." The water warmed quickly. Steam curled around her shoulders as she stepped into the shower and let it wash over her. She reached for the shampoo and poured a generous amount into her palm. The liquid was pearlescent, smooth like silk, shimmering as it caught the light. It felt expensive, indulgent. As she massaged it into her scalp, she closed her eyes, losing herself in the slow circles of her fingers. At first it was pleasant, comforting, even. The lather spread evenly, fragrant and full, and she imagined herself in one of those luxurious spa commercials where time moves slower and women emerge transformed. The sensation was light, airy. It felt like renewal. Then came the tingle, just a light prickle across the crown of her head, like the fizz of soda water or a sudden breeze stirring through dry grass. She paused, uncertain but not alarmed. The pamphlet Nancy had left behind had described it as a stimulating effect, a sign that the botanicals were activating circulation. "It means it's working." Sarah resumed her movements, a bit more slowly now. The tingling sharpened but never crossed into pain, at least not yet. She rinsed thoroughly, watching the suds swirl down the drain. Her fingers glided through her hair easily. When she stepped out and wrapped herself in a towel, she noted with quiet delight that her hair felt softer, smoother. Later, brushing her hair in front of the mirror, Sarah leaned closer. There was a sheen she hadn't seen in years, at least she thought so. A trick of the light, perhaps. Still, she smiled. Maybe this was what she needed, not just for her hair, but for herself. A small indulgence that made her feel like more than a mother, a wife, a caretaker. That night, she slipped into bed beside Michael without mentioning the new product. She felt almost silly for how excited she was, and he wouldn't understand. Men never did. She rested her head on the pillow and allowed herself to believe, just for a while, that change could be easy. By morning, the pillowcase bore a faint trace of something reddish. Not much, just a few tiny dots, so small she might have missed them if she hadn't been making the bed. Sarah ran her fingers through her hair and felt a faint tightness near the scalp, as though her skin had been pulled just slightly. She didn't mention it to Michael. In the mirror, everything still looked fine, better than fine. Her hair framed her face with renewed grace, and her skin, flushed from the warm shower, had a glow she hadn't noticed in years. She tucked the loose strands behind her ears and decided to wear lipstick for the first time in weeks. But as she moved through the day, something lingered, an awareness, a whisper at the back of her mind that something was off. Her scalp itched in short waves, annoying, not painful, but persistent. When she reached up to scratch lightly, her nails came back clean. No flakes, no residue, just that strange tingling pulse that had begun in the shower. She called Nancy that afternoon, casual, friendly, disguising the note of concern. Nancy's voice had been bright, almost rehearsed. Oh, that? Totally normal. It's the detox process. Your scalp is waking up. It's adjusting to real nourishment. Sarah smiled as she listened, but doubt crept in like fog through the seams of her certainty. She wanted to believe her, wanted to believe the packaging, the soft colors, the herbs harvested from mountains she'd never visit. That evening she applied the matching conditioner, rich and creamy, smelling of rosemary and something citrusy. The tingling returned, sharper this time. Her hands paused mid-rinse, but she shook off the hesitation. Nancy said it was normal. The flyer said detoxification might take days. She thought of other women, busy mothers, professionals, people like her, who had written glowing testimonials online. They couldn't all be wrong. Beauty, after all, required maintenance, even pain sometimes. She pressed a warm cloth to her forehead and leaned back into the quiet of the evening. The children were doing homework, Michael was folding laundry. The rhythms of their life continued uninterrupted. Only her body noticed the difference. By bedtime, the itching intensified. A heat had taken root just behind her hairline, like embers smoldering beneath the surface. She told herself it would pass. Everything worth having required some discomfort. When she leaned close to the mirror one last time before turning in, she noticed it. A single red spot no larger than a pencil eraser, just behind her right temple. It pulsed faintly beneath the surface. She reached out to touch it, then thought better of it. Instead, she turned off the light and walked away. By the fourth day, the tingling no longer felt like a gentle awakening. It had evolved into something more insistent, more deliberate. It moved in pulses now, like tiny sparks igniting just beneath her skin. Each time Sarah ran her fingers through her hair, she paused longer, fingers lingering at the crown where the warmth seemed to collect and throb. In the beginning, she had told herself this was progress. After all, wasn't that what change felt like? Uncomfortable, disruptive, like muscles stretching after years of stillness. That's what she had read on the forums. The journey to restoration was rarely painless. But now the doubt crept in, not as a scream but as a whisper. She noticed it first when she brushed her hair after lunch. The bristles of her boar bristle brush, once content to collect the occasional loose strand, emerged that day with more. It wasn't dramatic, not enough to panic, but more than usual. She held the clump between her thumb and forefinger, staring at it, heart ticking faster, the hairs limp and weightless in her palm. She pressed the hair into a tissue and threw it away quickly, as if discarding the evidence could erase the worry. Sarah leaned against the bathroom sink, blinking slowly. Her scalp still burned, mostly along the part and just behind the ears. She adjusted the scarf she had begun wearing at night, not for comfort, but to avoid staining her pillow with oils from the treatment. At least, that's what she told herself. That evening, the dinner table buzzed with its usual energy. Ryan recounted a moment at practice when his glove slipped, and the ball hit his shin. Emma offered a dry commentary about a substitute teacher's inability to pronounce half the class's names. Michael listened patiently, responding with quiet chuckles and affirmations, but his eyes kept drifting toward Sarah. She could feel it, his gaze, not judgmental, not even concerned, just observant. She had worn her hair pulled back into a low bun, the way she did when she didn't want to fuss with it. The scarf wrapped around her crown had been artfully tied, a splash of burgundy to match her earrings. But Michael saw through her aesthetic choices. She smiled at him, a tight, rehearsed smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Later, after the kids had gone upstairs, Sarah sat alone in the bathroom with the door slightly ajar. The mirror greeted her with quiet honesty. The redness along her part line was more pronounced now. She tilted her head, examining the curve of her scalp near her temple. A faint patch of dryness had begun to flake. Nothing terrible, nothing anyone would notice. But she noticed. She opened her drawer and pulled out the pamphlet again. Page 3 had a section labeled The Detox Phase, What to Expect. She read it again, slower this time. Mild tingling and warmth, temporary flaking, minor shedding, minor, mild, temporary. She traced the words with her index finger, as if physical contact would confirm their truth. On the counter, the shampoo and conditioner stood side by side like twin promises. The bottles were beautiful, still elegant, still untouched by the reality they might be causing. She lifted the shampoo, turned it slowly in her hands, and stared at the ingredients list. It was written in elegant font, too small to decipher easily. She knew Nancy would say, "It's plant-based, so it has to be good for you." Nancy had built her entire wellness brand around that idea: purity, nature, transformation. And Sarah had bought into it, not just with money but with hope, with longing, with the quiet ache of someone who didn't want to admit how much she missed feeling beautiful. Her phone buzzed softly. It was a message from Nancy. "Hey lovely, how's the hair journey? Bet you're glowing already, let's catch up soon. Maybe coffee Friday?" Sarah stared at the words. They looked harmless, warm even, but something inside her curled away. She didn't respond. She turned back to the mirror and began to brush again, slowly, gently, as if afraid of what she might find. The brush passed through easily the first time. On the second pass, the bristles caught, ever so slightly. When she pulled the brush back, there they were, another small collection of strands. She counted them, as if numbers might lend her control. 8 strands in one stroke. She set the brush down and stared at it. Her chest tightened. She picked up the bottle again, unscrewed the cap, and held it beneath her nose. The scent was still intoxicating, clean, herbal, calming. It did not match the anxiety curling in her stomach. Michael's voice called faintly from down the hallway. "You okay in there?" She cleared her throat. "Yeah," she said. "Just brushing out my day." She heard him walk away, accepting the answer without pressing. That was Michael, gentle, respectful, slow to worry. But even he had noticed something. She placed the bottle back on the counter, this time with less care. Her fingers trembled slightly. She reminded herself, this is normal. The pamphlet said so. Nancy said so. Everyone online said so. Still, she wrapped her brush in a tissue, as if ashamed of its contents, and slid it into the drawer out of sight. That night, she fell asleep to the quiet throb behind her ears, one hand resting on her scalp, the other clenched loosely beneath the sheets. Her dreams came in fragments, flickers of mirrors, whispers of hair falling like ash, and the persistent sense that something was slipping out of reach. The line between normal life and crisis began to blur somewhere during breakfast. Sarah had poured cereal for Emma and Ryan, exchanged a few quiet comments with Michael, and even tried to muster a smile. But the ritual that usually brought comfort now felt like a fragile stage. Her scalp throbbed with each sip of coffee. Each bite of toast came with a sharper snap of discomfort. She pressed a napkin to her part line and blinked harder than necessary to focus on the mundane, the sugar swirling in the milk, the sticky sweetness of honey on the toast. Across the table, Michael's voice was low and cautious. "How's the scalp feeling today?" She swallowed and replied lightly, "Better, I think. A bit less red." He nodded slowly, but his gaze lingered on her scarf. He'd noticed the way she wore it now, looser, more habitual. The decorative knot no longer mattered. It was protection. She said nothing more and pushed her bowl aside, excusing herself to rinse at the sink. The mirror showed truth without mercy. A patch of skin behind her right ear looked raw. A new red flare had spread to the crown, edges feathered like smoke. She touched the spot gingerly, cringing. That touch wasn't normal. Back at the table, she swallowed a smile and joined in the flow of family chatter. Emma asked for permission to study a friend that evening. Ryan requested pancakes for dinner. She agreed, but inside, Sarah felt as though she was walking on cracked ice, afraid to acknowledge every tremor. Morning left behind, and the day went on. Sarah toggled between conference calls and working on a blog post about postnatal wellness. The words felt foreign now. Her fingers itched to scratch, despite reminders of the rash they'd reveal. She adjusted her scarf on a client Zoom, nodding and contributing, but wondering if anyone would notice how tense she looked. After lunch, she found more hair in her brush, far more. It was gone beyond casual shedding. The soft clumps were impossible to ignore. She held them at arm's length, like pale seaweed, and closed her eyes against the wave of guilt. She couldn't hide this. That evening, Michael approached her just after dinner while she washed dishes. His tone was gentle but firm. "Sarah, I think you should stop using it." She froze mid-scrub. The soft hum of the faucet was loud. She turned slowly, her gaze fixed on him through the steam. He wore his concern like a serious suit. "It's meant to fix things, yes," he said, eyes steady. "But right now, it might be doing more harm. You're in pain and losing hair. Even Emma's asked if everything is all right." Sarah took a breath, resentment sparking in her chest. She remembered Nancy's words, just a few days longer. She could almost hear that confident voice smoothing over her anguish. "It's just a phase," she said. "Detox." Her fingers trembled as she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Detox or not, you're suffering," Michael replied quietly. "Let me help. Ask Dr. Henderson. Give it a pause. We don't have to wait until it's worse." Sarah ran her fingers through her scarf, clutching it. She felt defensive and vulnerable at once. "It's fine," she said, more sharply than she intended. Her voice trembled. "I promised Nancy I'd finish the set. The conditioner and serum, they work together." Michael looked down at the dish in his hand. He set it aside. "Sarah, this isn't about Nancy. It's about your health." She pulled away, voice low. "I know." But she didn't stop using it. Instead, she paused at the counter that night to jot a note to herself. 2 days. 2 more days of full usage, then we see a doctor. She needed control, even if it was self-deception. Later, after the children had gone to bed, she removed her scarf and sat before the mirror. No light mask tonight. She brushed gently through wet hair, then paused, focusing on her reflection. The red patch behind her ear had grown darker, more puffy. Tiny dots of broken skin were visible. A single tear slipped down her cheek. She pressed her fingers to the glass, staring at herself. "Who are you now?" she wondered. The silence made her feel small. There had been a time when a bad haircut or a smudge of lipstick would upset her more than this betrayal of her own body. She remembered laughing with Emma over makeup tutorials, curling her hair for date nights with Michael, adjusting her posture until it felt strong again. Now, she leaned in closer, watching the faint quiver of her lip. She unconsciously traced the word promise behind her ear with her fingertip, as if it were a tattoo inked in invisible ink. She smelled the overnight growth of sweat and herbal residue. The scent reminded her. It was still there. The product, the promise, the hope. She closed her eyes and wrapped her scarf around her shoulders like a shroud. She pressed her hand to her forehead, and this time, the pain wasn't physical. It was a heartbreak of identity, a woman of strength betrayed by her own longing. She cried silently, for herself, for the future hair she might never get back, for the fierce hope that had turned to a whisper. When she finally raised her head, the reflection had receded behind her scarf. She stood slowly, her steps heavy, and exited the bathroom without looking back. Some routines break without warning, small cracks growing until the structure fractures. For Sarah, the cumulative weight of small betrayals, tingle, flake, fall, denial, had shifted her foundation, and as she carried her scarf into the night, she felt those cracks spreading wider than she'd ever imagined. Sarah paced the living room in the early hours, the house cloaked in stillness. Moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting pale ribbons on the carpet. She had wrapped herself in a blanket, headphones on to drown out the silence, but now she had removed one earpiece. She needed quiet to sift through her growing unease. She opened her laptop and landed on a search engine homepage. The cursor blinked at her, pure potential. She typed Pure Essence shampoo reactions with trembling fingers and hit enter. The results rolled in faster than she could absorb. First, user reviews on a health forum. Threads with titles like "My scalp burned for weeks," "Hair falling out by the handful." Many profiles were anonymous, but some included photos, snapshots of red, inflamed scalps that looked hauntingly like her own. She clicked one link and stared at a close-up of a woman's burn marks, patches of raw skin, crusted scabs, fine hairs missing. She felt her lungs tighten. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was happening to others, people she didn't know but felt connected to in that moment. There was a pattern. Scouring further, she found mention of a lawsuit filed in Oregon 6 months earlier, State of Washington v. Eternal Beauty, LLC. It was a small action, launched on behalf of 9 women who had experienced scalp injuries after using the same product line. The complaint detailed allergic reactions, fungal infections, scorching pain, some even requiring surgical wound care. Eternal Beauty had settled the case quietly, no admission of fault, no press announcement. Sarah felt a chill. That was exactly what Nancy had warned her about. No reason to worry if it was just the body healing, but the lawsuit said otherwise. Desperate for context, she stumbled upon a private support group, a hidden enclave of victims sharing their stories. She requested access. Her plea simple: "I'm in the same situation, hoping to connect. Thank you." Within hours she was inside. Scrolling through pages of raw accounts, she read one that made her heart plummet. "I thought I was losing my mind." Alejandra said she woke up screaming. She tried scalp camouflage creams for weeks. "I had blisters so painful I couldn't brush my hair. My doctor called it chemical dermatitis compounded by infection." Another post described a woman who said she had considered ending her life. The words were typed in fragmented English, under uneven lines of light. "I felt worthless. I thought I had destroyed my beauty and my life. If I couldn't feel beautiful again, why stay?" Sarah put a hand to her mouth. She pictured Emma's face, bright and inquisitive. Not like this, not suffering because of vanity. Her throat tightened with guilt. Encouraged by the empathic tone of the forum, she typed a message: "I'm in Austin. Scalp burning, patches of swelling, terrible shedding. Anyone else from TX?" Within minutes, a reply came from a woman named Laurent. "Yes, Austin here. Same shampoo. I posted pics last week. I lost chunks of hair. I actually went to the ER." Sarah clicked view profile. Photos revealed injured scalp, one with a bandage wrapped around an inflamed patch behind the ear. As she stared, the severity of what she had done hit her. She wasn't just in pain. She had joined an involuntary sisterhood of suffering. Her phone buzzed. A friend. No reference to hair. She silenced it. There was no space in her head for small talk. She needed answers. Sarah downloaded images posted by Laurent, documenting every stage. Day 3, tight itching, no visible injury. Day 7, red splotches erupting. Day 14, pustules, crusting. Day 21, thinning hair. The timeline mirrored her own timeline with alarming precision. She scrolled further and found legal documents, emails from law firms seeking plaintiffs, messages from participants, and a PDF containing deposition transcripts. One witness had quoted a corporate memo instructing sales reps to classify customer complaints as detox symptoms to minimize claims. She swallowed hard. The realization pressed into her chest like a weight she hadn't prepared for. This was intentional. It wasn't just a bad batch or wrong skin type. It was systemic. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply. She thought about Michael, concerned but trusting that detox made sense. About Emma, playing her flute in the next room, unaware of the battle brewing for her mother's health. And Ryan, who had clung to her during a feverish night, afraid that his mother might disappear. She felt shame, but beneath that something stronger, a burgeoning resolve. Sarah messaged Laurent. "Can we talk? I'd like to ask a few questions." Within minutes, a reply. "Yes, call me. She's been through this. We'll help you." Fort Worth. Fort Worth. Not far. Closer than she'd imagined. Her pulse surged. She shut the laptop and pressed her forehead to her knees. Shame, grief, betrayal, fear, and now clarity collided. She was no longer floundering in self-doubt. She had a map of others who had suffered like her. She had shared identity with Lauren, a stranger capable of guiding her next moves. In that moment, she understood this was no longer a personal struggle. It was a reckoning. She lifted her head. Her eyes met her reflection in a small hallway mirror. The woman who stared back was exhausted, scarred, but no longer captive to denial. Her voice, silent but firm, reached from somewhere deep inside. "You're not alone." Sarah's breath came in quiet, measured pulls as she exited Michael's SUV into the soft morning light of a Fort Worth suburb. It felt surreal, driving over an hour to meet a stranger because of a shared trauma. The sun shimmered through oak leaves overhead, and the air smelled faintly of freshly cut grass and chlorinated pool water. Normal life seemed distant from the turmoil still churning inside her. The address Lauren had offered was modest, a 2-story townhouse tucked between newer builds, a tidy lawn with one pale rosebush still blooming. Sarah paused, shifting the scarf wrapped under her ponytail, an unconscious comfort that still clung to her. Just then, the front door opened. A woman in her late 30s stepped out, cautious eyes framed by dark curls. She moved with a limping grace, every movement deliberate, almost practiced. Lauren extended a hand, but they embraced instead. "Thank you for coming," she said softly, voice hoarse but welcoming. "Thank you for meeting me," Sarah replied, managing a small, grateful smile. The weight behind her gaze said more than words. Inside, Lauren offered tea and gestured to two mismatched armchairs near a living room window. The space was homey but lived in, blankets thrown over couches, a few children's toys scattered near a low dining table, a calendar marked with medical appointments. Sarah sat, careful. Her gaze drifted to an old photo on the mantel. Lauren smiling, hair full and glossy, standing beside a man and a golden retriever, a memory of a different life. "I looked like that once," Lauren said from across the room, as if reading Sarah's mind. "Before the breakout started, before I shaved my head." Sarah's throat squeezed. "I'm so sorry." Lauren shook her head, voice steady. "Don't be. You didn't do this to yourself. What I went through, I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But you deserve to know the truth." Sarah swallowed hard. She lifted the package of printed forum threads and legal documents she'd brought. "This is everything I found." Lauren reached across and took the papers. She scanned them, nodding slowly. "This is accurate. Now, look." She lifted one arm, rolled the sleeve. Under the skin behind her upper arm was a pale, flat scar, layered and uneven, like dried riverbed. With a deliberate calm, she turned the arm, revealing more, behind her ears, near the crown. Areas of thin, pink-white skin, gaps where follicles were gone forever. She had grown hair around the patches, but it was thinner, fine, almost translucent. Sarah blinked, heart pounding. "Do you see?" Lauren whispered. "These were once my pride. Now, don't have the words." Tears threatened. Sarah nodded. She swallowed, but nothing moved. Everything had shifted. Lauren went on. "After I realized I wasn't healing, I filed complaints. I saw a dermatologist who diagnosed chemical burns. Then it got infected, staph, then fungus. I was admitted twice on IV meds, and I lost this." She stroked the scar on her scalp gently. "This hair, this sense of self." Sarah heard the quiver in her voice but steadied herself. She asked the question she dreaded. "Why didn't you talk before?" Lauren met her gaze. "I was ashamed. I was angry. I thought maybe I caused it. Maybe I was allergic to everything. Then I saw other women with the same burns. I joined the forum. I found out the lawsuit. Then I realized they had trained their reps not to tell us." "Like detox?" "Exactly like that." Lauren's eyes flashed. "They told us it meant it was working. And when people complained they had patches or blisters, reps would share scripts, blame it on toxins, suggest scalp scrub. Keep buying conditioner, serum. Don't refund." Sarah pressed her lips together. Rage bubbled, then sadness. Every worst-case thought. How could they? "I reported all of it to a lawyer," Lauren continued. "But without proof, without you or others coming forward, it's hard to get them to act." Sarah understood suddenly that this wasn't just about her. It was every whisper, every retort she'd swept aside. It was a betrayal on a scale she hadn't believed possible. Lauren's home phone rang. She excused herself and left the room. Sarah sat, stunned, replaying the broken confidence in her own hands. She touched her scalp under the scarf, still burned, raw, and yet hers. Lauren returned, phone in hand. She looked at Sarah and smiled bravely. "That was the law firm. They want to file a case if we have more evidence. They're organizing victims this week." Sarah exhaled. A flicker of hope, then fear. What next? Lauren reached forward, pressing Sarah's hand. "We need to show them who we are. Real women, real faces. But we can't let the company hide behind natural remedies." Sarah looked up. Her throat felt tight but unbroken. She nodded. "Then, let's start here." They spent the afternoon going through photos, dates, product information. Every email from Nancy, every forum screenshot, every red flare photo. They compiled meticulously. Lauren showed Sarah how furious she had felt, how exhausted. She'd typed emails in tears, deleted drafts because she was too angry to think straight. Sarah realized a turning point had arrived. She'd moved from fear to clarity, from denial to accountability. As she stood to leave, Lauren walked her to the door. Their embrace this time was quiet strength rather than fragile comfort. "You helped me today," Lauren said. "Even if you didn't know it yet." Sarah stepped outside, hugging her papers. The sun was slanting low now, warmth fading into cooling air. The drive home beckoned, but Sarah felt different. She had borne witness. She had seen the consequences. She reached for her phone and typed a message to Michael. "I met someone today. I need us to talk, tonight." Underneath, she added a string of terrors. What if I'm scarred forever? What if this is only the beginning? She didn't send the rest. She walked to her car, taking in the crisp air. Her reflection in the window looked unsteady, but her eyes burned steady, determined. She didn't say it aloud, but she believed it. This is bigger than vanity. This is about truth. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and quiet dread. Pale green walls lined with outdated magazines, the faint buzz of fluorescent lights, and the soft clicking of a keyboard behind the reception desk. All familiar, all oddly menacing today. Sarah sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her scarf, more a necessity than an accessory now, itched against her reddening scalp. She tried to focus on the mundane, her breathing, the ticking clock, but her mind kept racing toward the unknown. She had seen Dr. Henderson only a handful of times before, once for Emma's rash, another time for a routine checkup. He had kind eyes, calm hands, and a voice that made things feel manageable. But today, Sarah wasn't looking for comfort. She was looking for answers. The nurse called her name, and she rose slowly. The hallway was colder than she remembered. Room 3 smelled like menthol and clean gauze. She sat on the exam table, paper rustling beneath her. Dr. Henderson entered moments later, clipboard in hand, and gave her a professional smile. "Sarah," he said, "good to see you again. Let's take a look." She nodded. No small talk. He pulled on gloves and gently unwrapped the scarf. As it fell away, Sarah watched his expression shift, subtle but unmistakable. The practiced neutrality of a physician gave way to something else, concern. He examined her scalp closely, parting sections of hair with a lighted probe. She winced as he reached the crown. "Sorry," he murmured. Sarah clenched her fists. "It's been getting worse." He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached for a camera and began documenting. "Multiple areas of inflammation," he said softly, almost to himself. "Visible pustules, follicular scarring. There's some thinning here, too. And here." Sarah stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the panels to keep calm. Dr. Henderson finally stepped back, removed his gloves, and sat on a stool across from her. "Sarah, what product are you using?" She reached into her bag and pulled out the bottle. "Pure Essence, Nature's Remedy." He took it, turning it over slowly. His eyes narrowed at the ingredients list. "I've seen this before," he said quietly. "You're not the first." Sarah blinked. "What do you mean?" He looked at her directly. "I've had 3 other patients over the last year. Similar presentation, severe contact dermatitis, chemical burns, follicle inflammation. All of them used some variant of this." Her throat tightened. She felt both validated and terrified. He set the bottle down and folded his hands. "Sarah, I believe you're experiencing a severe allergic and chemical response. This is more than just a rash. You have active lesions. The scarring I see suggests the damage could become permanent, if not managed soon." Her eyes burned. "Is the hair, will it grow back?" He paused. "Some may. Some areas, especially near the crown, are showing signs of follicle death. We won't know the extent until after biopsy results, and your body has had time to heal." The words fell like bricks. Biopsy. Follicle death. He handed her a tissue. She hadn't even realized she was crying. "I'm sorry," he said, voice steady. "But you came in time. We'll start treatment immediately. Topical steroids, antifungal medication, and a full discontinuation of any product from this line." She nodded, slow and deliberate, still frozen by the weight of what she'd heard. "I'll take a sample of 1 lesion and a few strands of hair for lab work," he continued. "We'll test for chemical compounds. If they match the known irritants from other cases, it could help with other steps." "Legal steps," she whispered. He met her gaze but didn't answer. Instead, he reached into a drawer and retrieved a sterile swab and small envelope. The biopsy was quick but painful. The scrape of skin, the pull of hair, each one a reminder of what had been taken from her. When it was done, he bandaged her scalp gently. "I'll call you with the results," he said. "In the meantime, rest, hydrate, avoid stress as much as you can." She gave a short laugh, dry, humorless. "Sure." As she wrapped the scarf again, he added, "You're not alone, Sarah. You're not crazy. And you're not the first." She looked up. That phrase again. She stood slowly, gathering her things. Her movements felt heavier now, not from pain, but from truth. When she stepped outside, the air was warmer. Cars passed along the avenue with indifference. Life went on. But for Sarah, something had changed. She wasn't just a woman with a damaged scalp anymore. She was a case, a witness, a voice. She drove home in silence, the medical folder beside her like a quiet verdict. She didn't turn on the radio. The hum of the tires was enough. At home, she set the folder down on the kitchen table. Emma peeked into the room, her eyes curious, cautious. "Mom?" she asked. Sarah turned, trying to smile. "I'm okay," she said, "but I need some rest." She didn't say the word biopsy. She didn't say scarring. Not yet. Later that night, as the house fell into quiet, Sarah sat at her desk with a blank notebook. She opened it, stared at the first page, then began to write, "My name is Sarah Wilson. I trusted a product called Pure Essence." The pen moved steadily, and this is what happened to me. In the gray light of Monday morning, Sarah sat before her laptop again, only this time she wasn't alone. Across the screen, 8 faces in small rectangles stared back. Women from California, Texas, New York, Florida, voices tethered by a shared experience. The group call had been arranged by Lauren and the law firm handling the case against Eternal Beauty Inc. The first voice spoke softly, a woman from Florida whose scalp had blistered so badly she'd been hospitalized. A few nods from others confirmed the severity, vivid descriptions of burns, anxiety, and sleepless nights. Another woman, in New Mexico, recounted how her expensive salon kept charging her for treatments to help the new hair grow back, even while it fell out in clumps. Sarah felt tears prick at her eyelids, but they were not tears of shame anymore. They were the first tears of solidarity. The lawyer on the call, her name was Amanda Reeves, explained their next steps. She would file a class action suit in federal court, seeking compensation and demanding a national recall. She needed plaintiffs, documentation, and full cooperation from victims. Then came the moment Sarah had dreaded. In the legal paperwork, she was proposed as the face of the case, witness, exemplar, public spokesperson. She glanced at her own reflection on screen, scarf-wrapped head, quiet eyes, poised voice, and swallowed. "I accept," she said, voice steady. Her hands trembled slightly, but there was determination there. Later that afternoon, she and Lauren prepared their first post for social media, a carefully worded statement introducing Voices Rising. The story of Sarah Wilson, 38, Texas mother of 2, had been polished, vetted, and rehearsed. Together they uploaded photos, one of Sarah before the injury, smiling in October sunlight, one after, with the damaged scalp visible under feverish hospital lighting. Within hours, the post began to travel. It was shared and reshared. Comments poured in. "My mom almost had the same reaction. I'm so sorry. Thank you for speaking out. We need to demand safer cosmetics." One message, private and brief, stood out. "Be careful. Nancy could sue you." Sarah stared at it, heart clenching. Just hours earlier, Nancy had reached out via Instagram with a surprisingly composed message. "Sarah, saw your post. Sad to see you hurting. Hope you understand it's probably just a rare allergy. Wish you well." Sarah read it twice. "Rare allergy. Hope you understand." The condescension in those words churned her stomach. She deleted the message without responding. That night, after tucking Emma and Ryan into bed, she found Michael in the living room watching the social media response. A short video clip had been shared of her speaking passionately on camera. No scarf, her hair partially covered, but her eyes shining clear. "I'm tired of people like Nancy telling us to push through. I'm tired of women being afraid to speak up because they feel ashamed." Michael looked up, his expression struck by both pride and concern. "We're starting a movement," he said softly. Sarah nodded. She looked at the screen again, at the cascade of comments and reactions. Then she shut the laptop and moved to stand by him. The next morning, she opened her phone to a flurry of notifications, local journalists asking for comment, podcast hosts offering interviews, private messages from women all across the country sharing their fear, their anger, their gratitude. She realized then that this wasn't just about hair. It was about something more primal, trust. Trust in friends, in labels, in corporations. Trust that the things we use daily won't harm us. When she arrived at the courthouse 6 days later to file the paperwork, she didn't wear a scarf. Instead, she wore a simple hat and a determined smile. The sky overhead was crisp and blue. Reporters clicked cameras, capturing her stepping inside. She walked forward as if on a stage, the gravity of the moment settling into her bones. Inside, the paperwork was thick, but she signed her name with steady resolution. Beside her, Lauren did the same, and Amanda finalized the documents. They shook hands, 3 women uniting for change. As they exited, Michael joined them. Emma and Ryan waited just steps away, their faces bright with pride and relief. Emma waved, and Sarah's heart swelled. She realized something essential is happening. Fear is no longer in front but behind. The community, global, digital, powerful, was picking up their voices, rising up. In that moment, Sarah felt two emotions: humility at the journey traveled and fierce hope for the journey ahead. Because now, she understood, by lifting her voice, she was not just seeking justice for herself. She was opening the door for anyone who had suffered in silence. And from these cracks, something stronger and more enduring was being built. The news hit like a thunderclap. Eternal Beauty LLC had released an official statement. The first lines appeared in her social media feed. Bold and defensive, Pure Essence products are rigorously tested and approved. Adverse reactions are rare and typically due to user misuse or pre-existing conditions. Sarah sat in the glow of her laptop screen, heart pounding. The words rang hollow. Blame shifted away from the company, back onto the individual. Her stomach clenched at the phrase pre-existing conditions, as though hair and scalp weren't part of who she was. In the hours that followed, statements from PR teams flowed like water through a dam. The words were polished, rehearsed. Each press release mirrored the last, deflecting responsibility, suggesting allergic predispositions, and labeling claims of chemical burns as unverified anecdotes. Influencers previously aligned with the company were suddenly quiet, their glowing rings of pure essence around bathroom counter selfies gone. Then came Nancy. Her message popped up accompanied by an ominous tone. Consider this your final warning. Delete your posts, retract your statements, or we will be forced to take legal action for defamation. Sarah stared. The neighborly voice she once trusted now sounded distant, cold, threatening. A familiar betrayal cut sharper this time. Pain bloomed in her chest, but anger followed quickly behind. She remembered Lauren's bravery, the others who had reached out, the woman in New Mexico whose tears had scarred her memory. This wasn't just about her, it was about all of them. She sent a text to Lauren and Amanda. They're pushing back. PR, lawyers, threats, still on. Their response was swift. We anticipated it. We're ready. Let's meet. But the pressure filtered into her home. Emma's phone buzzed in the kitchen, messages from classmates teasing her for mom's hair scare. Ryan hung back at evening pickup, uneasy around social conversation. A once warm family routine frayed under invisible strain. Sarah found Michael at the dining table, tapping out an email response to a local reporter asking for clarification. She dropped beside him, head in her hands. He looked up, concern in his eyes. Hey, she looked at him, voice thin. They came after Nancy first. Now they're going after me. He took her hand. You're doing the right thing. She closed her eyes. Right thing, but it's costing me everything. He squeezed her hand quietly. You're not alone. She nodded, but the doubt lingered like a distant storm. That night, she woke to find herself scrolling through the company's comments section. Supporters defended the brand, called the lawsuit frivolous. Suddenly, the world felt smaller, overshadowed by loud assertion and corporate hypocrisy. Tears came unexpectedly. She closed the laptop and hugged herself. She heard footfalls. A soft knock at her door. Michael slipped in, holding Emma close. The girl's voice was raw. Mom, at school, it's bad. Some kids said their moms wouldn't buy my candy at Halloween. Sarah pulled her daughter in close. Emma's tears fell freely. I'm sorry, Sarah whispered. Mom, Emma said, brushing her cheek. We're proud of you. Ryan appeared, peering from the doorway. Did bad people make you sick? Sarah smiled with trembling lips. Yes, but your mom is strong. That night she lay between them, unable to sleep. She remembered Lauren, the others, their lives pushed to the edge. She recalled Amanda's promise to fight. She thought of the countless comments she hadn't read. Messages like you saved me from trying that product, or your voice gave me hope. The next morning she woke early and pulled out an envelope left on her kitchen table. Inside was an unmarked card. Thank you, Sarah. Because of you I didn't give up. I have scars too, but I don't feel ashamed anymore. A heart you've never met. Her chest tightened. Tears came again, but this time they were not of fear. They were of solidarity, of purpose. Michael approached quietly. She held out the card. He read it, then hugged her. You're not just fighting for you, you're fighting for all of us. Sarah nodded. She wrapped the card in her scarf and tucked it into her journal. This was more than a legal battle. It was a reckoning. In the days that followed, she stood firm. She posted daily updates, behind-the-scenes footage of meetings, emotional reflections, subtle photos of hats and loose styles as her hair grew back. She dodged Nancy's accusations, Each legal notice was met with consultation from Amanda Reeves. The community rallied. Local news ran human interest segments, amplifying her story. The pushback still came, but its momentum dimmed as voices multiplied. Every shared testimony, retweet, or whispered conversation shifted the tide. And Sarah, once a woman shaken by vanity's price, emerged something different. A catalyst. Her voice rising, she still faltered sometimes when her scalp burned or Emma found more taunts. But her steps, slow, determined, led forward. She pressed on because she knew those she fought for were counting on her. The conference hall hummed with tension, a soft murmur of voices that rippled through rows of folding chairs. At the front, a long table was set up, microphones aligned like silent sentinels, ready for testimony. Cameras from media outlets, represented by black tripods and blinking red lights, created a faint glow under the ceiling. Sarah sat beside Lauren, Amanda, and two other women who had joined the case, one from California, her scalp covered by a silky scarf, another from New York, her hands shaking slightly. Across the table, two representatives from Eternal Beauty, legal counsel in crisp suits, exuded calm confidence. Journalists angled their cameras forward. The air felt dense, expectant, as if the atmosphere itself awaited a spark. Amanda cleared her throat. "Thank you all for being here. This is the first public hearing for victims of Pure Essence products. We're here to tell the truth." A hush descended as the chairwoman, a poised official with steel blue eyes, called the hearing to order. She gave a short introduction, the purpose: examination of injury claims, determination of harm, and possible regulatory action. The first testimonies came swiftly. One woman described waking to fiery burns. Another showed photos documenting weeks of antibiotic treatments, scarred follicles, weeks without hair. Then it was Sarah's turn. She rose slowly, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. Her legs were steady, her breath measured. She approached the microphone. Her voice trembled at first.
"My name is Sarah Wilson.
I trusted a product called Pure Essence because it promised beauty, renewal. But what I received was pain." Her story unfolded. Mornings of burning, hours spent researching lawsuits, visits to the dermatologist, biopsies, the surgical extraction of damaged skin. The camera captured the wrap of her scarf. She spoke of her children, Emma's tears, Ryan's whispered worry, and her husband Michael standing as a silent pillar. She couldn't hold back the crack in her voice as she described the moment she realized she was part of a larger community of victims. Each word carried gravity, each breath a testament. At the back, she glimpsed the company's legal team exchanging glances, some neutral, some dismissive. They whispered quietly, but she focused on the audience. When she finished, the room was silent. Then came applause, hesitant at first but spreading quickly. The soft rustle of paper as journalists adjusted recorders sounded like 1,000 rapid heartbeats. But the opposing table remained still. The chairwoman thanked Sarah and moved to questions. From the company lawyer came a challenge about product misuse, possible contamination, and if she'd followed the directions precisely. Sarah responded truthfully, yes, she had used exactly as instructed. She recited dates, documented purchases, even referenced Nancy's misdirection, labeling her suffering as detoxification. The lawyer's calm voice edged with pressure, but Sarah remained composed. Later, in a media scrum, Sarah was swarmed with questions. Channel reporters, YouTube journalists, a camera panning her as she exited. She answered with clarity, "We're not here to demonize natural products. We're asking for transparency and safety. Not one more woman should feel abandoned by a brand while we heal in private." That night, exhausted and shaken, Sarah arrived home. The house was dark, the silence heavy. She sank into the couch. Michael brought her tea. Emma handed her a drawing, the new foundation logo sketched with crayons. Ryan, already asleep upstairs, had called her mom the brave. She laughed softly, tears filling her eyes. But rest was elusive. Her phone pinged with notifications, mixed reactions online, threats, encouragement, news updates. The next morning, Evergreen Beauty, Eternal Beauty's parent corporation, released a statement through major news outlets. They would recall certain Pure Essence batches, but maintained that overall reactions were minimal, suggesting continuing full compliance with safety standards. Social media amplified the news, arguing recall versus negligence. Nancy posted a video walking through her bathroom mirror, hair glossy, saying she'd switched to a newer formula and that she empathized with rare sensitivities. She called for calm, pleaded privacy. The story was trending. Sarah awoke to find media vans in front of her home, 2 local channels, 1 national, Reporters peered through windows. She could feel her pulse thrum. She stepped onto the porch, waved at a distant camera, closed the door. Inside, the walls felt close. She headed to the kitchen desk and opened her laptop. She was looking at hundreds of comments, some supportive, some skeptical, some vicious. But among them she saw shared photos of more victims, some afraid, some hopeful. Her finger hovered over the screen, but then she didn't close it. Instead, she tapped out a message. This is not the end, not for any of us. That night, Amanda sent a message. Good initial impact. Regulatory board will review. Big meeting next week. Be ready. Sarah closed her eyes. Her scalp still burned. Her scalp still throbbed with pain. Her hair still thinned. But her voice was rising above the threat, and the company's silence, save for the recall statement, sent a message too. In the stillness, she understood the true depth of her transformation. From vanity's victim to catalyst for change. From private suffering to public reckoning. The breaking point had been crossed. No going back. The morning sun fell softly through the window blinds, painting warm gold stripes across the living room floor. Outside, life buzzed on as usual. But inside Sarah Wilson's home, something had changed profoundly. A letter lay on the coffee table, official and crisp. It bore the logo of a federal regulatory agency. With trembling hands, she opened it. The words confirmed what she'd only dared hope, effective immediately. Production and sales of all variants of Pure Essence shampoo, conditioner, and scalp treatments are suspended pending full investigation. The CPSC, Consumer Product Safety Commission, will review all test results, documentation, and reports submitted by plaintiffs. Sarah's pulse knocked in her ears. After everything, the pain, the late nights, the courtroom, this was affirmation. The letter felt heavy in her hand, but also liberating. Across the table, Emma peeked in. Mom? Sarah lifted her head, eyes bright. Good news, she said, voice restrained with emotion. Emma smiled, tentatively at first, then blossoming. That's amazing. Ryan appeared with a drawing, crayon strokes bursting with color. He thrust it into her hand. It depicted his mother as a superhero, cape and crown included. She pressed it close. Thank you, sweetheart. Sarah spent the next days wading through messages, hundreds, maybe thousands, emails, social media DMs, even handwritten letters from women who had found courage to speak after seeing her testimony. One note in particular stood out. My whole family stopped using your product weeks ago, but your voice gave me the courage to report it. We are so grateful. Another, I finally told my doctor and found out I have early follicular damage. If your case hadn't gone public, I'd still think it's normal shedding. Sarah reread them aloud for Michael in the kitchen. He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. No words were needed. At dinner, the atmosphere had shifted. Emma teased Sarah gently about wearing hats still, but offered to help her try a new hairstyle, something to complement her delicate regrowth. Ryan insisted breakfast the next day be Mom's special pancakes in the shape of a heart. When bedtime came, Sarah tucked both children in, kissing Emma's forehead and ruffling Ryan's hair. Emma paused in the doorway. Mom, thanks for being brave. Sarah enveloped her in a hug. Always, she whispered. In the mirror that evening, Sarah spread conditioner, dermatologist's gentle formula, through her damp hair. As water droplets glistened on thin strands, she noticed small but vital signs of renewal, tiny hairs sprouting in previously bald patches. A sob caught in her throat. Joy, relief, gratitude. She touched her scalp, feeling the subtle, rough texture beneath her fingers. The scars would remain, she knew, but also the new growth. Growth meant time and hope. Later that week, a small press conference was held at the regulatory agency. Sarah and Amanda stood at the lectern, flanked by other plaintiffs. A banner behind them read, Safety first, consumers deserve better. Sarah spoke briefly. Our goal is not revenge. It's accountability. It's ensuring that no one else experiences this pain. We want safer products, honest information, and respect. This is just the beginning. The applause that followed was heartfelt. These weren't demands, they were promises. And Sarah felt the truth of them in every fiber of her being. Weeks later, the family took a walk through a neighborhood park. Birds sang, children ran. Sarah walked hand in hand with Michael, then Emma, then Ryan. The air felt lighter, and so did she. Ryan skipped ahead, turned back, and waved at her. She waved back. No scarf. Just her hair, styled loosely around a satin headband, soft but real. She caught her reflection in a storefront window and paused. No fear in her eyes. Only purpose. The scars were faint lines, but beneath them, life pulsed firmly. That evening, as the sun set in gentle pinks and purples, she wrote in her journal, "Today I saw new hair. Today I heard thank you more times than I can count. Today I stood without fear, without hiding. I am not defined by my scars, but by what I've done through them." She closed the journal, then the house. In the stillness, she stood in front of the full-length mirror once more. She smoothed the satin headband, lifted her chin, and smiled. A pact formed in her mind: advocacy, safety, speaking truth. She would build on this moment. Educational workshops, partnerships with dermatologists, policy suggestions. But tonight, she was simply Sarah, a woman who had lost something precious and found purpose instead. And in that quiet transformation, a new chapter began, not of pain but of possibilities. A gentle hush settled across the conference room as Sarah stepped up to the podium. Soft lighting highlighted her face, strong, calm, focused. Behind her, a banner read "Voices Rising Foundation, Empowering Safe Beauty." Below, an audience of women, many with headscarves or hats, sat expectantly. Some wore the thin tufts of regrowth that told their stories silently, lovingly. This was no ordinary gathering. It was the first national summit organized by the foundation she and Amanda had launched just 6 months earlier. Dermatologists, consumer safety advocates, lawmakers, and brand representatives were present. But today belonged to survivors, and to stories, to lived experience, and to change. Sarah cleared her throat. She spoke not only from memory, but from the unshakable foundation of her journey. "Thank you all for joining us," she began, voice even. "When I first started sharing my story, I was afraid of being judged or ignored. But I discovered something more important: community. Every woman here has a story worth telling, and together, our voices can protect others." She paused. Eyes reflected gratitude and trust. She introduced 2 doctors from her advisory board, Dr. Henderson, the dermatologist who diagnosed her, and another specialist in cosmetic regulation. They outlined emerging standards for ingredient transparency and third-party testing for hair products. A local congresswoman followed, stepping up to present a proposed bill, the Women's Cosmetic Safety Act, temporarily dubbed Sarah's Law by advocacy groups. It proposed mandatory reporting of adverse reactions, clear labeling of botanical ingredients, and recall penalties for intentional misbranding. When the audience applauded, Sarah felt a surge of emotion. Pride tempered by gravity, this was momentum born from pain, translated into policy. Later, a presentation hall full of middle-aged listeners waited patiently. Sarah stood beside charts showing regulation gaps. She introduced educational programs initiated by the foundation, including free scalp health sessions at community centers and webinars for older women wary of online beauty trends. In the front row, several attendees, including a few with silver-streaked hair, nodded, some wiping tears. One woman raised her hand to ask how to protect against misleading marketing and subtle misinformation. Sarah responded slowly, "Check with your dermatologist. Ask for proven test results. But most importantly, trust what your body tells you. If something feels off, that's your first warning sign." Heads nodded. The murmur of agreement felt like companionship. Backstage, Sarah received gentle hugs from attendees who shared their testimonies. One woman described how she switched decades of salon products after her own family. Members suffered after using unregulated hair dye. Another explained how the foundation's helpline helped her son's fiancé spot odd burns early. Sarah pressed each hand, embraced each woman, and received crayon drawings from grandchildren. Her face softened. Words of thanks poured quietly between tears and affirmations. These were the moments she'd chased since the beginning, the transformation of suffering into something hopeful. Later that afternoon, a panel discussion assembled experts from the FDA office, dermatologists, and lawyers. Sarah and Amanda moderated. Dialogue turned to achievable steps, and standardized patch tests for botanical extracts and direct telephone hotlines for reporting. Product reactions and penalties for misleading claims like detox or purification, terms that had undercut victims' pain. Sarah guided the conversation with clarity and compassion. Afterward, Dr. Henderson hugged her. "You've helped change the conversation," she said. Sarah's eyes stung. "We're just getting started." The summit concluded with a ceremonial signing. Supporters and legislators signed petitions before cameras. A newspaper photographer snapped the moment. Sarah, standing between Amanda and the congresswoman, pen poised, foundation document in hand. That image was trending online by evening. News channels ran story highlights. Community groups shared it with pride. "Look, one of us." A letter arrived later that night. Inside was a note from a mother in Colorado. My daughter had been suffering from unexplained scalp sores. After your videos, she found the real cause and is now healed. One voice truly can change so much." Sarah wept quietly in the kitchen as Michael wrapped his arms around her. Emma and Ryan peeked in, offering crayon flowers and smiley stickers. Their pride was shy, but real. A week later, Sarah found herself before the full-length mirror in her bedroom. She brushed her hair, a gentle textured wave brushing fragile but flourishing strands. Very close, faint pink lines traced her scalp, a reminder of scars endured. She touched the healed skin and thought of the woman she'd been, frightened, ashamed, hiding behind scarves. Then she thought of who she was now: advocate, catalyst, educator, someone who turned her suffering into change that rippled far beyond herself. She laced her fingers under her chin, straightened her posture. She wasn't perfect, but she was complete. That weekend, she drove to a small town 2 hours away, invited to deliver a workshop on reading product labels. She looked out at a church basement filled with attentive women, many older like her grandmother would have been. She spoke frankly about beauty, aging, and the deceptive appeal of miracle formulas. She connected with each participant as mother, wife, friend, survivor. Emboldened by experience, guided by science, grounded in empathy. At the end, women lined up to hug her. One elderly woman kissed her cheek, whispering, "God bless you, child." Sarah closed her eyes and pressed her hands together. For the first time in months, she felt unshakable purpose. Her legacy wasn't just her story. It was every life changed, every voice lifted, every rule rewritten. A gentle breeze whispered through the open windows of the cottage, carrying the scent of pine and wild lavender. Inside, Sarah sat at a small writing desk, her journal open, a single pen poised. She paused, looking out at the rolling hills blanketed in morning mist. For the first time since her journey began, she hadn't woken to notifications or deadlines. She had nowhere to be but here, nowhere to rush. She closed her eyes and let the stillness settle. The mirror on the wall reflected a woman not defined by scars or pain, but by resilience. She ran her fingers over the faint pink lines along her scalp, symbols of survival. She was proud of them. She remembered where it all began, a hopeful purchase at a friend's gathering, a product that promised transformation but delivered destruction. She had hidden her pain behind scarves, avoided mirrors, and sank into shame. She recalled the moment she decided to speak, not for herself but for others who didn't have a voice. Now, seated in the countryside retreat she had gifted herself, she reflected on that journey, from fear to purpose, from isolation to community, the foundation, the legislation, the countless lives touched, all born from a single spark of courage ignited in a bathroom mirror. Her breath deepened. The mirror across the room was no longer a source of torture, but a testament. This was her face, her truth, her legacy. She opened a new notebook and began writing. "This is not just my story. This is ours." Her pen moved steadily as she began crafting the first chapter of what would become her book, a memoir interwoven with advocacy, education, and healing. She paused, leaning back. Words came freely as if the river of her life had finally found its channel. Each sentence was an ode to the women who had shared their pain, the friends who had stood by her, the lessons learned. Time slipped by unnoticed. Weeks later, she found herself in a small local bookstore lined with shelves of stories, each cover a doorway. A modest crowd had gathered for her first signing event, mostly women in their 40s, 50s, even 60s. Many wore soft hats or long hair parted carefully to hide healed scars. A few younger faces were there too, curious and supportive. She greeted them gently, signing each copy of Beyond the Mirror, a title she had chosen because the real reflections happen beyond appearance. Each book carried her name and a handwritten note. "May your mirror show your strength, not your fear." A quiet hush fell as an elderly woman approached. Her hair was white and wispy. Her hands shook slightly as she extended a signed copy to Sarah. "Thank you," she said, soft voice thick with gratitude. "I went through something similar over a decade ago, but I didn't speak up. I felt ashamed and alone." She paused, tears brimming. "Your words gave me validation. I feel seen for the first time in these pages." Sarah embraced her gently. "You are not alone," she whispered. The woman smiled, tears slipping free. "Because of you, I have my voice again." That night, back at her cottage, Sarah stood before the mirror once more. The scars on her scalp had faded but remained, a roadmap of her journey. She touched them, breathing deeply. She realized her reflection had changed, lines of strength traced across her face, quiet confidence in her eyes. They no longer betrayed anxiety or shame. They glowed with purpose. She spoke softly, "You are brave. You are enough. You are not alone." Her voice cracked, but the words rang true. The moonlight streamed in as she returned to her desk. Her notebook lay open on the first page. She paused, recollected her courage, and began writing the words that would guide her next steps. "This is the voice of every woman who has been unseen. This is the dawn after the night we conquered together." She smiled softly, pen still poised. Then she wrote the first chapter's true title, Beyond the Mirror. In a world often fixated on surface beauty, Sarah had discovered something deeper. She had stepped beyond pain into purpose, transforming a single story into a movement. She no longer feared mirrors. She embraced them, imperfections and all, as evidence of her journey. The cottage was quiet as she closed her notebook. The hills beyond the window glowed under a sky full of stars, an affirmation that even in darkness, there was light. Sarah turned off the lamp, tucking her notebook away. She felt whole. This was no ending, only a beginning. Her voice would carry on, turning pain into hope, personal trial into collective courage. And beyond that mirror, she could see the world looking back, stronger and kinder because she dared to stand tall. Maybe you've never gone through something like this, or maybe you've been quiet about your pain for far too long. Either way, remember this: your voice matters, your story matters. If this journey touched something in you, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below, share your thoughts, or just say hello. And if you'd like to hear more stories that heal, challenge, and inspire, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We're building something real here, one voice at a time.